Okay, let's get it. Black girl magic dripping. Yeah, she's on a mission. Keeping our culture lifted. Now you can watch and listen. Tammi Mac. Tammi Mac. Oh, what show is that? It's the Tammi Mac Show on Fox Soul.
Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac, yeah, ooh that, Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, hey, so you know this Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac.
Welcome to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tammi Mac. In April, President Joe Biden vowed to withdraw all remaining troops from Afghanistan, ending the longest war in American history. This week, the Pentagon said they've reached the halfway point of their withdrawal. Although our war in Afghanistan appears to be coming to an end, there is no end to the physical and mental trauma soldiers will continue to experience from this war and every other war. The business of being Black tonight is PTSD in veterans, Black veterans. Please welcome retired U.S. Marine officer and the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Sherman Gillums Jr. Hi, Sherman.
Hi, Tammi.
Current Sergeant First Class in the Army, Lakeisha Sanders. Hi, Lakeisha.
Hey, Tammi.
Afghanistan war veteran, the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Alliance and the Diversity and Inclusion Veterans Advisor for City of Hope, Victor Lagrune. Hi, Victor.
Hey, Tammi, how are you?
Fine. And retired Navy combat veteran and the CEO and founder of 7-Star, Dimitri Roberts. Hi, Dimitri.
Hey, Tammi.
It's a tradition on the Tammi Mac Show to ask the question why. That is always our first question here. And so our first question to you, officers or military soldiers, I should say, is why should Black people care about PTSD in Black veterans? And anyone can take that question.
I guess I'll start. Why should Black people care about post-traumatic stress disorder? While a person is not more likely to develop PTSD just because of their racial or ethnic background, being a part of an ethnic group that experiences stresses and traumas at higher rates is connected with an increased likelihood or risk of PTSD after experiencing a traumatic event. And we can talk about things like seeing George Floyd die on a sidewalk to being in a car crash or having domestic violence happen at home. Well, serving in the military in itself presents inherent risks. So the chances of taking your stress response to a threat beyond its reasonable limits, combined with the lack of education on post-traumatic stress and barriers to timely access to care, make matters worse. And that should be a concern for every member of the Black and African American community.
Well, to Sherman's point, Tammi, also being Black in America is an inherent threat. Not only am I a military veteran, but I'm also a police veteran where I served in the city of Chicago. And why this should matter to all folks, especially our fellow Black folks in our communities, is because we want to educate you on what the signs are and what the symptoms are and what this feels like and what these things mean, which all of Black people in America in today's day and age have experienced some level of trauma. And what we know, Tammi, is that PTSD rears its ugly head in so many different ways. And I think we'll be able to talk a lot about that on this panel this evening.
Absolutely. Victor?
You know, one of the things I think is really important to point out is this. Veterans, like many members in our community, understand what it's like to suffer from some form of trauma or another. And what's really imperative for our community is that we destigmatize mental health, because not just veterans are suffering from PTSD in our communities, right? So many people are suffering from a number of different causes, like Sherman pointed out, but it's vital that we destigmatize PTSD, but also look at how we can rely on good sources of support within our community, especially those sources that are culturally competent. So finding clinicians and practitioners that are culturally competent, but also reflect our community is going to be vital.
Yeah, great point. Lakeisha?
This topic of PTSD and mental trauma, it really, really hits me home. It hits near and dear to my heart. It really hits home. And there are just a lot of people who are really going through it. Specifically speaking about the Black community, a lot of those in the Black community come from neighborhoods that they were already dealing with their own traumatic issues, right? There were things going on. Perhaps their mom was working multiple jobs, trying to make ends meet, and the child, had to be the adult in the house. Maybe they grew up in a household that perhaps had addictive behaviors of parents that didn't know how to cope. Uh, there, 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 there are many issues that can go on in the Black community before one decides to enlist or become commissioned in the military. And so, without knowing more healthier coping skills, then it can also make things worse, right? A lot of people, when they first come in, they're coming in from high school, right? And so you would think you would put some rank on, and you're, old enough to vote, and you become an adult, and it's not it, right? You're still trying to learn how to adult. Yeah. But all the things that's going on around you, and being able to actually, deal with it, actually having the ability and be okay to voice whatever concerns you have. Just as mentioned before, the negative stigma of, mental health in the military, and especially in the Black community, it's really, really disheartening. We should not be counted out. Black folks should not be counted out. We have just as much fight as anyone else. At the end of the day, we all bleed red. Why should we be counted out? Within the Black community, there should be a better mindset when it comes to having good mental health. It's important that we be okay with the fact that we feel some type of way about something. And it should also be not a crime to talk about it. But there's such a negative stigma behind getting the help. One can feel like, oh, they're weak if they try to get help and stuff. And also, the other side of that is one can say, okay, well, we want to try to talk about it, but they may not trust the person they may want to talk to. Maybe the person may not be a safe space. And that right there is what we really, really have to get down to the bottom of.
Excellent. So I've heard each of you kind of mention the inherent trauma that Black people face in America. And so my question becomes, if that trauma exists already, and I know this is going to sound like my chat room is going to go crazy when I say this. And obviously I'm Black, so I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but a way in which we can get answers. If there is an inherent trauma that comes with being Black in America, then does being in the military exacerbate that? Or are you already there, so it comes with the territory? Is it something that you can get through easier because you know what trauma is?
Well, I think it's a two-sided coin there, Tammi. And the two-sided coin is, I think that the military has the propensity to trigger traumas, but you don't necessarily know what that is. So if you're coming in and you've experienced trauma as a young African-American, particularly as a male, coming into the military, there are certain things that are, in most cases, are going to trigger something, but you really don't know how to explain that, how to navigate it, and really how to ask for the right type of help from the right type of people. So in most cases, that behavior starts to manifest in poor actions and activity. Before we came on, we were talking, and she was sharing, one of her cousins or something was in the military, and he got kicked out because he was fighting. We see that a lot, especially as senior leaders in the military, where we've had to deal with junior, folks that are coming in that are under our commands or in our units that we become responsible for, really struggle with activities and behaviors that really have the underpinnings of trauma and PTSD, but they don't know how to vector themselves into the right help. But I think we're getting a lot better about that, not just as a community as a whole, but as the military in general.
And here's something, we got to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sherman. I want to.
I'll mention it quickly. There's something a bit counterintuitive though, because the military does condition fear. It does condition one to put words to trauma through training and repetitive exposure to stress. And I was a drill instructor for 3 years. I watched young men filter through parasylum. Many of them were Black, and it does, in a way, help resolve a lot of those issues with the right mentorship, with the right coaching. In many cases, joining the military saves the lives of a lot of folks because it does teach you how to deal with trauma and deal with past stress.
I think to just the last piece, I know we got to go, but here's the thing: to what we're talking about here is that ultimately, at the end of the day, just because you have PTSD or just because you've experienced some trauma or just because you're having a hard time does not mean you got to take yourself out of the game. And I think that's the message of education here. It's that, hey, we all have a level of trauma if you're just human, right? So, and then you add the fact that you're being Black in America, that adds to it. But the military does induce those things, as he pointed out. But ultimately, you can overcome and you can adapt. And I think that's the kind of message of hope that we want to put forth, is that you're not out of the game. You might feel that way in some moments, but you're not out of the game. And we are all living testaments of, if you push through, there's a bigger plan out there for you.
Yeah, thank you. So we are going to take a quick break and come right back, because what I want to know is the difference. When we think of PTSD, it's often been affiliated with the military. And so I want to know if you all have the information, where does PTSD originate? And also, what's the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder in the military and as a civilian? We'll talk about that when we return on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul, where tonight the business of being Black is PTSD in veterans. So please welcome retired U.S. Marine officer and the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Sherman Gillums Jr., current Sergeant First Class in the Army, Lakeisha Sanders, Afghanistan War veteran, the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Alliance, and the Diversity and Inclusion Veterans Advisor for City of Hope, Victor Lagroon, and retired Navy combat veteran and the CEO and founder of 7-Star, Dimitri Roberts. Thank you all for being here tonight. Before we left, Sherman was telling us that the military conditions you to stress. And Dimitri agreed and said there is a level of stress that the military induces. But if we're civilians, we don't even know what that means. So can you explain that to us, Sherman?
I spent 3 years as a drill instructor, where my job was to put recruits in circumstances that were similarly potential combat. And if you think about what combat is, it's I wouldn't say it's the ultimate form of trauma, but it's pretty bad for people who find themselves in firefights and things that ordinarily somebody on the street, depending on where you're from in America, wouldn't find yourself. But we do that on purpose, because one of the things that your brain does, it encodes threats and it responds to it. And the more you put words to it, the more you can rationalize and regulate your emotions through that trauma, the better you'll be able to deal with future trauma or extreme trauma.
I heard you say that a few minutes ago when you said put words to it. What does that mean?
Well, when you think about what post-traumatic stress disorder is, and it's not a military disorder, it's what happens to any human being who's subjected to something that's trying to hurt the individual, right? Now, let me give you a good example. My son saw a cicada, and because he didn't understand what a cicada is, it scared him. But when you explain to him that, look, it's a bug that doesn't bite you, you can look at it, you can pick it apart, you can give it nomenclature. Well, you do the same thing when you're training for combat. You understand how the enemy is moving on you. You understand what your purpose is. Your purpose is to counter that, so you don't feel like you're a victim. You're just ready to counter or to assert your presence.
That's good. I get it. It's like what parents teach their Black sons when it comes to being stopped by the police.
Well, when you're more level-headed, you don't feel as under threat, right? I mean, you feel like you're in control.
Well, the other side of that is, let's close the gap here and understand that what Sherman is talking about is happening every day also in Black communities. And that is a conditioning of a normalcy of trauma. And where PTSD usually rears its ugly head, and this is a good educational point, is when you are now outside of that environment, but you're still, your body, your emotions, and your reactions are still acting as though you're in an environment that is going to potentially cause you harm. And there we
Yes.
have it,
Oh
folks.
my gosh, I
PTSD.
get it. Yes. Oh, it just clicked with me. It look, this just happened to me literally 15 minutes ago. My best friend Kelly, who's a white girl, she sent me some emoji hand claps, and they were white emoji hand claps. And I said to her, I don't know why, but I'm offended by those white emoji hand claps. Like, like it stressed me out a little bit. You know, I'm like, I felt like she was saying something with the white hand claps, but it's because we've been through this whole George Floyd situation, and now everybody Black, our level of stress is so high now. Oh my goodness, Dimitri, you made it so simple there. So then if you're in the military, you're conditioned to deal with stress. But then once you get out of the military and become a civilian again, those particular methods no longer apply, and you don't have to really protect yourself in that way, but then you've been conditioned to do it, so it becomes problematic in the real world. Am I getting that right?
Let me take 2 seconds and put on my South Side of Chicago hat, right?
Okay, go.
And that is this. Everybody has seen our cousins out someplace, and we're like, why are they acting like that? Why are they acting like this ain't the hood? Why did you see them? You see some of our community members in airports, in restaurants, and places, and you like, they're acting ghetto. What they're really acting out is their environmental circumstances, their response, their protective methods, their PTSD that is triggering certain type of reactions, interactions, looks. How many times have you been out somewhere, Tammi, and you like, why is that girl looking at me like that? You know, why do I feel some existential threat from somebody? I'm not a problem here. But the perception is that you are. That's PTSD at its finest. That's somebody reacting where they would in a normal circumstance. That's a protective mode. Yeah. And they're outside of that environment. And that's where all of us veterans have experienced, in most cases, PTSD, hypervigilance, night terrors, or you find yourself in a circumstance that snaps you right back into the environment where your physical and emotional responses were necessary for your life or for your safety, but you're no longer in that environment.
And it's kind of, and then when you say things that trigger, whenever, I guess, normal people, like not normal people, but civilians who have not been in the military, whenever we think of PTSD and those soldiers, we think of the movies where you see these soldiers who have PTSD, and like, if I drop a book on the floor, that may trigger them. Because it sounds like a bomb or something like that. Or you go off on your family because you think they're attacking you. So that's a movie kind of situation. But what is the truth to that, Lakeisha?
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so here it is.
I saw you squirming, girl. I saw you. I see you squirming.
I was like, oh, okay, please call me. Okay. It is so common for people to limit PTSD to being associated with being downrange. There are many things that happen on the home front, many things that happen in the U.S., wherever one is stationed, in garrison, wherever that soldier is, there are plenty of things that go on outside of being in the sandbox, right? That can trigger PTSD, that you would feel some type of way that you will never come back again. There are people who have lost battle buddies, NCOs who have lost their soldiers, who have had to bury their own. That really, it really does something. I tell people when civilians, even once they're in high school or college, they say, "Oh, I'm joining the Army. I'm gonna join the Marines or whichever, right?" And I say, "Are you sure?" Because listen, I'm not gonna be a used car salesman to you. I want you to know exactly what you are getting into. The military is great. understand that. But I also let them know that the way that you leave is not going to not be the way that you come back.
Wow.
It is a life altering thing. And
So much so
everyone
that
goes
some
through this.
soldiers, so much so that some soldiers don't even want to discuss their experiences in the military. Victor, let's get you in on this.
So that's often the case for several reasons, not just related to PTSD. Quite frankly, most Americans don't really want to know what we go through, right? They're engaged in this fictitious distance around what trauma looks like and what war looks like and the level of bravado that people experience. But at the end of the day, what's happening is that there's a fracturing, what we call moral injury, for example, right? When you are raised to be a kind, gentle child, you're raised to not hit people unless you have to, you're raised to be good and polite, and then you go into an environment that trains you to kill, right? Let's be very clear about something. Our job is to execute the will of the American people abroad, right? Domestic and foreign. Now, when it comes time to come back, quite frankly, a lot of people will say things like, did you have to kill anybody? Did you see any dead bodies? Right? And people are not in tune with the fact that we have been exposed to trauma, and individually we're trying to resolve that trauma within ourselves. So it's important to help civilians understand that not all people who served in the military suffer from PTSD. Quite frankly, it's around the same percentage of service members who have PTSD as it is civilians, right? The percentages are not very different. But the difference is that we become the owners, the poster children for PTSD.
Why is that?
And the danger is, well, because it's easier to say, look at that service member, right? You can go back to the term from the 60s and 70s when people would say going postal, right? Remember that term?
Yeah.
You can also go back to World War I and World War II, where it was shell shock, it was combat fatigue, right? So every generation, even going back to, early on, what we have to do is get Americans to be better understanding of what PTSD is, how many people do suffer from it, but also there's life after that, right? That was part of what Demetri Roberts was talking about. That does not mean that you're out of the game because you suffer from depression or anxiety or high stress. What it means is that you're adapting. You have to develop the skills necessary to accommodate your needs in a different environment because you don't have the controlled structure of the military, right?
But first you have to know that you have PTSD. So how does one know that this is what they are suffering?
Can I describe what it feels like? Because I suffered it after I was injured in the Marine Corps. I want to use an analogy that everybody can relate to. Imagine you're in a car and you sense a threat. It doesn't have to be real. You sense a threat. So you hit the accelerator and you're going really fast. And then you realize the threat isn't really there. You hit the brakes, but the brakes don't work. And you keep going. That's your brain's emotional and logical control shutting down. All right, hormones are involved, adrenal glands. There's a lot of reasons why it gets overwritten. Amygdala override is what they call it. You just have simply overwritten your body's ability. All the blood that went into your arms and legs and went from your heart and stomach. That's why you get the flutters in your stomach and your goosebumps. That's all because all the blood is going towards survival. And you do that too many times, it's like taking too many steroids. Your body breaks down after a while and you can't control it, or you have to rein it back in through immersion therapy or drugs to help regulate the depression or substance abuse that often accompanies post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. So having the ability to understand it, you begin to understand it's not a military thing. It happens to a lot of people, in fact, before they join. And that's why they join. They're running from something. And then it gets exacerbated if it goes untreated.
Wow. Lakeisha, have you experienced post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes. It is, it's an experience. And there's certain, I like to call it spidey.
Do you know what your triggers are?
Yeah, I mean, so far I'm pretty much being able to identify them. I know that I know that I don't wear heels because if something happens, I need to be able to get away. So if I need to sprint, which I will, then I will do that. if I am in when I walk into a building, I already have the idea of the schematic, of the layout, any event something happens, and I know the most direct way of escape. When I am I pulling up somewhere and I'm parking in this parking lot, if somebody parks up next to me, I'm gonna wait for them to get out the car first because I don't know what that person's packing.
Right. And it's what you are describing now is interesting because I think we wouldn't really consider that PTSD, because it seems so, it kind of seems so ordinary in a sense. And so when most people think of PTSD, we think of something grander. So I'm glad that you share those, because all of that is very internal. And I think we look for things that are external when people say PTSD. So to know that it's not always something external and it's mostly something internal is something that I think most people need to know.
And it's a cluster of issues. It's not just the one thing. That the hypervigilance, it's when it starts to impact your life. So you have to meet the diagnostic criteria along other lines, but that's an indication for going to get help and getting diagnosed, as she described it.
Victor,
and in a broader context, right before we go to break, is that everybody, especially if you're Black in America at this point, you say something feels off. That should be your indicator that I should talk to somebody outside, somebody, a trusted source, or somebody to say that I'm not feeling right. We all know when we don't feel right. And that's the key indicator that you have experienced something in your body, your mind is not reacting to it in the right way.
Yeah. Victor, is it possible that soldiers can come out of the military and not have PTSD, or does every soldier suffer from it?
Oh, most people transition out of the military and move on to the next phase of their life, the next chapter in their book, right? And that's across the branches of the military. But unfortunately, so many people are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed around PTSD, right? And that's really where it's traumatic, because we now become stereotyped and stigmatized around PTSD. So someone might say, well, I really want to hire this veteran, but I'm not sure if they're okay. Or I really want to rent to this person, but I'm not sure what they might do. Right. So now we start pushing back. If someone finds out that you were in the military, they may not want to date you, right? Because of something that they saw on TV. And you'd be surprised how many people have learned about PTSD from movies, which is the absolute worst way to do almost any learning.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But again, it's incumbent on us to tell the truth about what PTSD is, what survival looks like, and how people are moving on with their life and flourishing.
I never thought about people not or discriminating against soldiers, because America holds soldiers near and dear to their heart. Thank you for your service. And so yeah.
Because they don't have to be the troops.
I'm sorry, say that again.
They love the troops because they don't have to be the troops.
Ooh, on that note,
part.
On that note, we're going to break.
Yeah.
We'll be right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. I'm telling you, these soldiers are teaching me a thing or two today, y'all. I can't even. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show. Starting next week, the Tammi Mac Late Show will be on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. So before we left, we were talking about how soldiers are discriminated against once they are out of the military, once they're done with their service. So when they hit American ground, and I said, I didn't believe it because America holds the troops so near and dear to their hearts. But I want to share an example with where it clicked with me just recently. The president of my HOA in my neighborhood wanted to not allow military soldiers to buy homes in the area. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand. I was like, I don't even get it. Like, why are we having this discussion? I'm confused about this. Isn't this like, this guy has to be illegal some kind of way, right? And literally we had to take a vote on whether military could purchase in our area or not. I was completely dumbfounded. It's something about the VA loans or something about the types of loans that military soldiers get. I just thought it was ridiculous. And so I believe you when you say, Sherman, when you say, Victor, you're discriminated against. I mean, we all know that Black soldiers, go ahead, Lakeisha, say what you just said about being a hero abroad.
Oh, being a hero at work and a zero at home.
Yeah.
We're out there trying to do the hard work, and we can't get love from our own people.
You can also mention something about being a veteran, because everybody wants to put this cloak of divinity from afar. There are a lot of intersections that meet at that veteran status, meaning race, meaning gender, right? When you go into a store and you're out of uniform, you are who are you born, that skin you were born into. And sometimes when you're in a uniform, you know, depending on the situation, there were Black veterans who got lynched for asserting their rights. Medgar Evers was a veteran when he was assassinated, right? Being a veteran doesn't do a whole lot when you have a society that is where its foundation is really about the identity of who you are, not the one you acquire, right? And so you could acquire that veteran status, but it won't immunize you when you're that lieutenant in that truck, when he was going down that road trying to find a lit area to pull off when the police tried to pull him over. I forget, I believe it might have been in Virginia.
Yeah, I remember.
That uniform didn't stop him from having that pepper spray put on him, or those police officers put those cuffs on.
No, it did not. No, it did not. And to add to that, no one was outraged by it. It wasn't this big, I can't believe he did it to the military. You know, all the white folk that go on and on about military service and the flag, and, you know, and don't kneel during the I forgot what the thing called, the national anthem. Don't kneel during the national anthem. I'm sorry, y'all putting so much stuff in my head right now.
I understand.
You talked about, Victor, being misdiagnosed. Why? Why are people being misdiagnosed?
I mean, there's a variety of reasons why, right? The first thing that I would point to is once someone comes home, they have to be in a space in which they can be honest with themselves about what's going on internally, right? Your family might say, oh, he or she doesn't act the same, or he and she acts differently, or they keep to themselves, right? Or they may talk about you to other people, but not necessarily to you all the time. So by the time you start coming to a place of self-reflection, and if you do seek out help, you also have to go somewhere where people can accommodate you, speak to you in a way in which you can feel open about what you're going through. And far too often, African-American veterans and service members, when they do seek care, many of them are misdiagnosed because there is also some level of bias within the health system. You know, I recently testified before the Veterans Affairs House Committee about inequity in the VA. And one of the biggest issues we see in the VA is the lack of cultural competency, the lack of representation. There are very few clinicians and therapists who look like us. So what happens when you engage a system that is not prepared for you, that does not accommodate you, that does not really seek out a best way of addressing your needs, right? We withdraw from those systems. We go back to what we know. We self-medicate, right? We get into fights. We have unprotected sex. We do all the things that are counterintuitive to keeping yourself healthy. The things that you may not have done in uniform, you certainly might do when you feel like you're out on your own without your battle buddies, without your structure and your command. So again, we do need a system in the way in which we welcome people back to society and in communities, but we also are prepared to meet the growing needs of the population.
I want to jump into our chat room real quick. Therese says, thanks for serving our country, my fellow comrades. And then Incog says, interesting, what Lakeisha described sounds more like being extra cautious than PTSD, which I kind of lean that way too. But tell us why it's not, because apparently some of our viewers were feeling the same way I was feeling. And I was saying it's more internal than external. And normally we don't know that. We don't realize that it's an internal thing too.
Yeah.
Well,
so
if I can take a stab at that,
I'm
gonna let you know, because this is important, because I think, you know, particularly me having been in the military and as a police officer, I've kind of seen both sides of this, and I've seen it with civilians, I've seen it with military members. To their point, it's where the caution is coming from. It's where it's coming from. It's what's causing us to be hypervigilant or more cautious, where now we have a better understanding and it's coming from an internal place. It's the reasons why our level of caution or our level of anxiety is heightened. It's simply because Keisha's sitting in that car, but she's really in her Humvee in Iraq on the side of a road where an IED just went off. And she is now experiencing that, where she's actually sitting on, 63rd and Main Street in Alabama. She mentally and emotionally is back in Iraq in her Humvee. So it's the place for where those things are coming from that triggers it to the level of PTSD. Back to you, Lakeisha.
Yeah, you agree with that, Lakeisha?
Oh, definitely. So there are certain things that I know that I'm not ready to share because of the
It's understandable. It's totally
you know what I
understandable.
mean? And
No. It's totally understandable. And
Can I try to break it down a little bit?
and we respect that. We respect that.
The brain is wonderful because it does its job of trying to protect you and preserve you, right? And it goes into this process where, again, you're running, you're getting ready to fight. You can only go back to that well, but for so many times before it takes an effect on your heart. It takes an effect on your parasympathetic response, your body's ability to digest food. You get that adrenaline and that cortisol surge too many times for reasons that aren't actual threats. They're just perceived. It does take its toll. And that's where it becomes beyond typical anxiety, which is healthy, or even fear, which is healthy. It's when it starts to become a response to things that won't actually hurt you. And that caution starts to have that physiological response too many times that it becomes a disorder, because then you're starting to have issues with relationships. You feel suicidal. It starts to take effect in many other ways that have to be remedied. So it's not something you can live with for too long. And that's why it's important to understand what's happening beyond generalized anxiety or things that are just about vigilance for good reason.
Yeah. Let's
But
go
here's
hold that thought, Dimitri. I'm going to go to the
Yep.
chat room real quick. Let's see. Gentile killer. I think that's gentile kill. Yeah, not gentile. Gentile killer. Change your name. I don't want you to be a killer. Can we change that? Don't be a killer. Says the business of being Black is watch your back. And then Jacqueline Bailey says, how do these vets feel about including females into the draft? Just the ones I've put in. I'm not sure. Just the ones I put in. I'm not sure what that means, Jacqueline. But I'm not understanding the question when it comes to females in the draft, because females have long been able to go into the military. But how do you feel about that? Well, let's start with Keisha. How do you feel about women being allowed to be in the military? Do you think it's something that should be allowed?
So I feel that, if someone feels like that, that's their calling, they want to answer the call to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. They have that right. They're able to do that. Know that the way that you come in, and you can have an open mind and everything, but understand that there is a possibility that not everyone is going to be open to you. Throughout my career, I have worked to go against a stereotype that perceives me based on a demographic that I did not choose. I'm a Black female in the military.
You're still in the Army, Lakeisha, right?
Yes.
So how can you continue to serve knowing that you suffer or have experienced PTSD? How does that work?
So just like we mentioned, talking about, actually having a safe space with people, talking to trusted people, them reminding you that you're not by yourself in this fight. And actually, when you're not around, they still speak up for you. That's something that helps. The other thing is I have my faith, and so I have my faith in God. I am very, very active in my church. And so it's small victories, small steps. Some days are better than others. Some days are pretty rough, but you make it through one day at a time. And for me, I have to continue to have the will to know that this thing is not going to beat me.
Yeah.
And I talk to kids all the time too, as well. So that also is another motivation for me to try to strive to continue to work on myself.
It's worth
Dimitri, you
mentioning
say
that
you.
the draft is
Go ahead, Sherman.
compulsory. The draft is compulsory. So that means you're forced to join. It happened in World War II. It happened during Vietnam. What we're asking is, should women be forced to join when the country is at war?
Okay.
That's what the question means.
Because I immediately thought football, but I was like,
football.
Who's being drafted into the military? Yes, Americans were once drafted into the military. And there was a little talk about it not long ago about in implementing another draft. Dimitri, you say you don't call it PTSD, you call it PTRD.
Well, I was speaking in the broader context, Tammy, and that is we're, I think, on a path and on a journey to try to educate folks beyond just the veteran space. Us veterans get indoctrinated into the culture of trauma. We also, to give the VA, to give advocates like Veteran and Sherman and folks like Keisha who have the bravery to stand up and share their stories, there has been a lot done. Our Vietnam veterans who suffered the same traumas as we did, in some cases on a higher level, also were further traumatized when they came back home because they couldn't even show their face in public. They were spat on if they were in uniform. They did not have the broad public support that us post 9/11 veterans have had. I've been in stadiums where there were standing ovations for me, and I was just there in uniform at a baseball game. I can't tell you the number of support and outpouring that all of us veterans have had being post 9/11 veterans in today's America. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to your question, so the point is we want to highlight the positive things that are going on as well. But to your question, the PTRD, post-traumatic relational disorder, is just to talk about PTSD in a broader context that other folks in the community, particularly Black people, can better understand, which we've all been in circumstances, particularly in relationships, that say, you know what, I'm not dealing with that kind of person anymore. Yeah. They were harsh to me. They did something to me. They caused me to feel a certain kind of way. And it's very difficult for me as a Black man, as a Black woman, to associate or assimilate myself back into a situation or an environment that makes me feel that same way or brings about those types of thoughts or feelings. Post-traumatic relational disorder. So in a broader context, for folks that are watching this and they say, well, maybe I've suffered some trauma. Well, you most certainly have. And the bigger point there is when you start to feel, I am feeling different. My thinking is off. My emotions are off. I'm stressed. My stress level's going up. My ability to cope is going down. What is the next thing to do? The next thing to do is do not turn a blind eye, call for help, reach out to a friend, say, hey, these white clapping hands made me feel some kind of way. It's great that you can share something like that in a public forum and you can get some support, but so many people don't. And they then start to, as Victor has pointed out, as he always does so succinctly, we start to blame ourselves, we start to turn inward, we start to self-medicate, and then it becomes a much broader problem that's so much harder to fix.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't want the white clapping hands to minimize what PTSD really is, but in the context of you sharing how the definition of it is why I brought that up. And what was funny is that my girlfriend then sent me some black clapping hands. She was like, "Feel better?" I'm like, no, I still feel some kind of way. What is this?
But to your point, Tammy. It could be also something as small as a rectification or a sharing of even where the source came from that could get you on the other side of it. So it's not something you have to live in. It's not something that has to consume who you are. It could be a very momentary thing. And as long as you are willing and have the courage and the fortitude to say, this is kind of a problem for me right now. In most cases, you're going to find yourself on the other side of it a lot faster than if you internalize it.
Great point. Great point. So, Leah, let me not minimize what I'm offended by and what triggers me.
Get it out. Get it out.
Yeah. Lakeisha, Incog, our soulmate, says, I didn't mean to cause you any discomfort. My apologies. It's something that average New Yorkers would do, being very cautious, given it's a big city, yet dangerous city at times. So please forgive me. So we're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi McLeod Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi McLeod Show on Fox Soul, where tonight the business of being Black is PTSD. And we've discovered that not only does it affect our military veterans, but it also affects just the average everyday person. A lot of times we connect PTSD with the military, but that is not so. And all of these veterans and soldiers have told us that it can play out in your everyday life, whether you've been in the military or not. Do you think, and anyone can take this, but do you think that because you've been in the military, you're more prepared to deal with PTSD than the average civilian?
If you got help, if you admitted to it, if you learned about it, and if you got help. If not, you've suppressed it for so long, you've hid it because you didn't want to lose your security clearance. It probably got worse because there's an expectation of additional stress. So it really depends.
And go ahead.
From a broader sense, right? I think the veteran population has been socialized around PTSD, seeking out mental health, suicide prevention for over the last 20 years. So in a lot of senses, it's been more concentrated, the discussion is, within our community than it has in the general population. But we've got to do a far better job of talking openly about this in society.
And we're going to continue to talk about it on the Tammi McLeod Show. We'll be right back. Stick around. Don't go nowhere. Welcome back to the Tammi McLeod Show on Fox Soul, where tonight we're talking with military soldiers and veterans about PTSD. Sherman, name me the NAMI program's home front and Sharing Hope. Please share with us.
Well, I'm proud of the work that the National Alliance on Mental Illness is doing to connect with communities that typically get left out of systems and face inequities in terms of healthcare and even understanding and stigma. So we're proud of what NAMI Sharing Hope is doing to build bridges to connecting with members of the Black and African American community, as well as NAMI Homefront, which is a program intended to provide information to families, veterans, service members, caregivers on pathways to healing, especially in the areas of mental illness and finding wellness. Because you take that I off of illness and you put that we, that's how you get there. And so we want to build communities around healing, and we do it through those programs, Homefront and Sharing Hope.
Dimitri, 7 Star.
Yeah, so 7 Star is focused on, and I started 7 Star specifically to address some of the disparities that we have between police and the communities for which they serve. As we know, there's a national crisis in this country where police officers are having a hard time dealing with citizens, and most of those citizens look like us. But community members are also have a mistrust and a broken trust with police officers. So we've created an app called Protected, and Protected is the first contactless policing application that allows you to have a contactless interaction with the police officer in real time. So the next time you get stopped, Tammi, if you're using our app Protected, the police officer won't have to get out of their car to conduct their traffic stop with you. And then you'll get a chance to rate that police officer in real time after that stop is done. Is this a
national situation?
Yes, ma'am.
What?
We are currently in beta testing in Chicago, Houston, and with several universities. But we are going to be the first in the country to have an application that allows you, particularly as a Black person, to have a better experience with the police officers that are serving you.
So can I download that app now and be a part of the beta testing?
You sure can. We'll talk offline and we'll get you on board.
Much. Thank you so very much. Victor.
Ma'am.
Please share with us City of Hope and your work.
So, one of the things I started aside from City of Hope was I started a group in Chicago called Destigmatizing Mental Health amongst Black men. So what I did was I brought together a group of veterans that I knew very well, but also a lot of civilians that I knew. And what I really wanted to do was re-socialize men around talking about what we're going through. We're often told to be tough, be a man, push it to the back, deal with it. And what happens ultimately, those issues that you've been pushing on the back burner come to the front in some of the most unproductive ways. So we're looking at starting new chapters around the country. But for me, it's getting men to be more comfortable with talking, seek out a battle buddy, talk to someone, don't go through it alone. And that's the best way we can support one another in our mental health.
Thank you for that. And Keisha, we got about 20 seconds here for you. I know you're trying to break these language barriers. So give us 20 seconds of why.
So the reason why I would like to break the language barriers, I actually been studying foreign languages all my life. My go-to language outside of English is Japanese. And so I feel like my calling is to help kids. And so, as I'm helping children, I don't want language to ever be a barrier. I feel like we can all help each other. And should we dare cross the aisle with someone who possibly was, they were raised differently than we were, to find common ground and to help our world be a better place.
And it will definitely help, I think, prejudice and racism.
Definitely. Try to eradicate that too. Try to do my part.
I like where you're going and how you're thinking. Nobody's ever brought the language barrier up as a reason for why we're going through what we're going through. But I believe that that's a part of it as well. So thank you all so much for being on the Tammi Mac Late Show tonight. Keisha, Victor, Dimitri, and Sherman, and all of you soulmates. Until tomorrow, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.